Selwyn here from WynnStrength.com, bringing you the 6th week of my training vlog. 6th week turned out to be a deload week, so I thought I'd take this time to talk about the importance of a deload week and also reassessing your beliefs about your own training systems and thoughts about how you perform. I wanted to start by saying that for the past about a year or so, I always kind of believed that I needed to have a deload week every 4 weeks or every 3 to 4 weeks. I don't know where I got that thought process from. I don't know where that entered my head, but for the longest time I was thinking, oh, every 4 weeks need a deload. During the Dark Horse training program, they had a deload week up to every 3rd week. So even more so, that was reinforced because that was a pretty brutal program, very intense, and mentally I was feeling fatigued and physically sore after that 3rd week, and I noticed my training didn't feel as productive as it was, and I didn't feel as mentally engaged in the training after that 3rd week. Whatever the cause of that was, I'm not sure where that came from, but it did play right into the fact of that training program where I had that deload week every 4 weeks, every 3 weeks. But now with this new training program, well, with the redoing of the strength program, I think it was the 2.0 version, so now there is only a deload week on the 6th week. So the 6th week is a deload. What the deload does is, in this way, we've reduced the intensity slightly and we've drastically reduced the volume. So instead of not doing anything, which is an option, so you just a complete off week, you can either reduce the amount of weight you lift while keeping the volume up, or you can reduce the amount of volume you do while keeping the weight or the intensity relatively the same or without really reducing that, or you can do a combination of all of the above. So this deload, the way that they formed it, is that they have obviously reduced intensity by a little bit and reduce volume by a lot. So what they're hoping to do is mitigate the stress that's caused by a lot of volume work. That's a bit more important, I would say, for when you're developing that strength work, because you still want to engage those muscle fibers and that technique of lifting heavy singles. So we're still doing ones at 7 or 8s, at RPE 7 or 8, but we're reducing that volume to maybe one's extra back offset, and you reduce that by 20%. So we're kind of playing around with reducing the amount of time under tension while still kind of trying to drive up some numbers by keeping that intensity there, so we're not losing the specificity of 1 rep max training. And what that does is it is meant to help refresh the body, because we can't necessarily take the foot completely off the gas pedal. We just want to take the foot half off the gas pedal. So instead of pushing it really hard, because we've been pushing it really hard for the last 5 weeks, last week I did have the double PRs, and actually this week for the squat with the SS yoke bar, I actually squatted the same amount of weight that my last 1 rep max tested time was. So about 7 weeks ago now, no, probably 8 weeks ago, I squatted with the SS yoke bar 440 pounds, and we did that again yesterday at a significantly less RPE, so it didn't feel like a 1 rep max, it felt like an RPE 8, 8.5. You'll see that in the voiceover section of this video. So everything's kind of culminating together, and what I found surprising and what is really cool that I need to remember is that just because we think we have these beliefs about how our body reacts to certain training, it's not always going to be the case forever, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So maybe 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, I did need that break every 4 weeks, but now that we've had a bit more accumulated training under our belt, we're kind of pushing some more weights, we're needing the body to get stressed a little bit more to drive up those adaptations. Maybe now is when I don't need to do a deload week every 4 weeks. It might be every 6 weeks. It might even be pushing that out a little longer, maybe 7, 8 weeks. So something, again, to keep in mind with your own training, and always be cognizant of these changing factors and changing situations and circumstances, is that nothing is set in stone, and your body kind of will obviously change as you progress down the path of developing strength, because our bodies have to change in order to adapt to that new stress stimulus. And the thing with the deload week is, if it's a fine balance of striking rest and stress, because if we obviously deload too much, then it's going to delay our progress. Now you might say that's a good thing because it gives us a longer time horizon. So if we just say we have a 12-week program, we're going to deload every 4 weeks. So that's 3 deloads in that 12 weeks time frame. Whereas if we're only deloading every 6 weeks, we really just have 1 deload. Actually, sorry. If we're deloading every 4 weeks on a 12-week program, we're going to have 2 deloads. But then for the 6-week cycle, we're going to have deload we're just going to have 1 deload in the middle of that training cycle. So when we look at those numbers, we're doubling the amount of time that we're resting over the course of, say, a year. We can times that out, where now we've had a lot more rest weeks rather than we have of stress weeks. And there comes to a certain point where your body doesn't really need to rest as much as you think it does, but that does come with time. So much like when you start off training, you're probably going to only train once a week, and then you're going to build up from there, once a week, twice a week. Then over time you get to 3. Then we need to add in an extra day in order to drive some more changes. Then 4 days a week. That's probably the upper limits. Maybe 5 days a week is probably a good maximum number of days, because you definitely, unless you're a professional athlete, you probably don't need to be training 7 days a week really intensely. That's where we kind of scale it back. All right, 5 days a week, and now we're going to start doing 4 days a week. But because we're still relatively new on this training journey, we can keep that up. We don't really need to put a deload week in there, because we've just started to enter 4 days a week training, and we don't really have that much accumulated fatigue, because the weights that are used aren't being used that are that heavy. They're relatively heavy to you, but they won't be absolutely heavy in that frame. So someone squatting 135, that's at 10 RPE, will be different to someone that's squatting 500, even though that's an 8 RPE. The tonnage is going to matter here, because even though the body's adapted to that weight, it's still a lot of weight that the body has to endure and has to recover from. So that's just going to scale up. So when we start entering the more intermediate, the more advanced training waves, when we have more things playing, more stress is being put on the body, that's where you have to start paying attention to when these deload weeks come in. As you train longer and longer in those years, you're going to learn your body, you're going to figure out what works, what doesn't. And when you start feeling mentally tired, when you don't want to start working out, and that becomes more of a pattern. If you don't want to work out once, I would ignore that. But if, like, for the last 3 weeks you didn't want to train, you probably need to look at reassessing something or looking at taking a deload week. Same with tiredness and muscle fatigue. If you're constantly tired and constantly fatigued, there's the potential that you need to do a deload week, or a rest week for that matter. So all these things that you kind of need to listen to, keep that in mind when you're training. Always listen to the body and make sure that you're paying attention to those little cues that are little now, but if you push through them, might cause bigger issues down the line. So that's just how I like to think about deload and rest weeks. Again, with other programs, they've done every 4 weeks, and they've even had you suggested not doing anything for the rest week, which I was a fan of in the past. It gives you a total week off. And again, different program, different goals, different outcomes, and also for your own personal training history, maybe that week off is something you need, or maybe you do different types of deloads. So we'll have a 12-week training block, we'll have that rest week in the middle after that 6th week, and then after the 12th week, once we've peaked, or once we do some sort of max effort day, then we take the next week completely off training. Maybe we just do some light hobby style, lifestyle moving, but nothing that would enter the realm of training, as it were. So that's something to think about too. You don't necessarily have to do one or the other. You can mix it up, see which one works best for you. Some people might find it better to reduce intensities or weights being used while keeping the volume up, while others might find it better to reduce the volume and keep the weight heavy. But this is something that you're going to have to learn over time and over several different experiments on yourself, because no two bodies are the same. So that being said, I'll throw over to the training videos and the voiceovers.
So beginning here with the squats with a safety squat barbell. This is actually 440 pounds, which is my last tested 1 rep max. Putting it here up at probably an RPE close to an 8, and came up really fast. Definitely a lot faster than last time I tried that weight successfully. So this is a great result of the program. We're in week 6, technically the deload week. Here we have a couple of back off sets. Nothing crazy, just 375 for a set of 4. Again, working on keeping that back upright and maintaining that bracing in the core. And you can see probably an inch or 2 slightly too high, but again, not too concerned with that, because that's something we can work on in the future. And we've just supersetted that with some clean and presses. We did these for 155 pounds for a set of 5. Something I'm alternating each week is kind of doing a clean and press and then a clean and press and a clean. More so because I really want to work on that clean and press and get that overhead press technique down as well. To pivot over to some strongman style training. That clean and press is one of those pivotal movements, and I mean they do it with odd implements, but if I can't even get the form down with the perfect implement to use, then it's going to be really hard to transition over to a sport where you're doing this with an odd implement. So something I've been working on is that clean and press, mainly the clean technique as well as the overhead press technique will follow through. Right now, I can actually overhead press more than I can power clean, so something I need to work on in the future. Hopefully that comes through. I need to learn, need to do some research, need to figure out what weak points I have, and really work on that explosiveness. And that's one thing that I've noticed is one of the harder things to figure out is how to drive through the hips and get some speed out of the bottom of the lift once that weight starts to hit those maximal levels. For myself personally, it's really hard to fire up as fast as I can, obviously with the lighter weights, but I think that'll come with time. I think gradually we're increasing that ability, and having those pads that really helps. Here we have an overhead press, 220 pounds for a single at 8, actually probably 9. Again, that exact same sticking point right at the forehead level. So that's something I can look at. So when you look at accessory lifts, look where your sticking points are. A great accessory lift for this for me would probably be pin presses right at eye height. So you just start below where your sticking point is, so you can kind of grind through that and train the body to work through that weight. You should be able to hit some heavier weights because we are shortening down that range of movement. Supersetting that up with some chin-ups on the fat barbell just to get a bit more grip activation. Again, I like to alternate pull-ups and chin-ups just because neither is better than the other, and since we can do both, why not? And then that's wrapped up with some reverse crunches. Again, one of those anti-movement ab movements, so we're trying to, obviously, it'd be better if I could keep the legs and torso in line. Starting off day 2 with ab bench press. This is our top set at 305 pounds, about 15 pounds shy of my current 1 rep max. Here we have deadlift top set, 455 pounds for a set of 1, 40 pounds shy of my 1 rep max. We didn't really want to push the weight today. I think I was just feeling a bit too trained there for deload week, so kept the weight limits within that RPE weight rating. And that's a great thing with RPE training, is that you can adjust weights and movements for the day so that you kind of have that auto regulation feature, because those weights were feeling quite heavy today, close to an RPE 9. It might have been just for the day I wasn't feeling it. I might have had bad sleep or bad nutritional choices in the days leading up to today. So when you have that RPE, that rate of perceived exertion thrown in there, it does account for your day-to-day fluctuations, because we're all human and we're not always feeling 100% all the time, and we do need to balance the need to push the limits and build the body, as well as listen to the body and not push it when it needs some rest and extra accumulation of some recuperation there. So move on to day 3. Day 2 was quite short. Day 3 starts off with 2 count pause squats. And this is where I start to use, obviously, the regular barbell to keep that technique down. And I think it's a great, the 2 count pause. This is probably a 1 count pause, to be honest with you. Top set there at 405 pounds for a single. And we just had back off sets at 365 pounds for a set of 3. Again, you notice here with the weights that we're dropping slightly with the intensity, not too much, and we're cutting down a lot of volume. That should help allow the body some time to regenerate and recuperate there. And you look at these, you'll notice that I'm probably doing a 1.5 count, and slightly high on these reps, so probably 2 inches too high. I like the 2 count pause squat just because it does train you. It should train you to keep that locked in position at the bottom there and remove some of that stretch reflex. Here we have top set of the Z press at 185 pounds for a single. That matches my current 1 rep max tested for the Z press. It's a favorite movement of mine for building up that overhead press. I think it's a great way to remove any leg drive that you might have and really focus in on breathing and bracing into that core there. And just supersetting that with some barbell rows. Here we have the volume work for the Z press. Just 1 set of 3 at 165 pounds, nothing special. Definitely with the Z press, look at putting your hamstrings on the floor as much as possible. That should help with the stability there. Try not to let it come up off the floor, but obviously flexibility is going to be a factor there. And then using that with a final set of barbell rows at 215 pounds for a long set of 8. Had to stop halfway through here. And again, just like the pull-ups and the chin-ups, I like to vary barbell rowing with this type where it's floating and a little bit more back English, body English, and then you have pendlay rows where they're from the floor and a bit more strict. So we're wrapping up the week with the 4th day, starting off with some incline bench pressing with probably a medium grip and a medium height, not the lowest setting on the incline bench, and that's just going to be dictated by your equipment. Again, like everything else, I like to vary the heights, for the bench press anyway, I like to keep them right now at a medium grip just because that's not leading to shoulder injuries. But if you don't have that, you can go wide grip, close grip, medium grip, all the grips in between, as long as it doesn't hurt your shoulder. And just like the incline heights as well, I'll vary that month to month or week to week, depending on how I feel. This is the second incline setting on the bench, and that's going to be obviously depending on what equipment you have. I like to mix it up just because it is kind of a training stimulus for both the bench press and the overhead press. There's no real right or wrong, and to say that there's a direct correlation between your incline bench and your flat bench is probably a bit too simplistic. So I think it's just great to build some extra volume and add that extra range of motion into the bench press too, because even if you want to do even if you're practicing that arch in the back, when you do it on a flat bench, you're obviously decreasing that range of motion. But when you add that incline in, now you're arching and your chest is actually almost close to flat if you can find that balance between the arch and the incline. Now you're doing a true flat bench press because your bench press would be your chest would be parallel to the floor. So something to consider there, and you increase that range of motion and just get a bit more hypertrophy and muscle stimulus there. The second superset for the day is starting off with some chin-ups with the regular barbell. So with the regular diameter pull-up bar there. Something, again, alternating. I don't think you can do too many of another. And we're supersetting that with some stiff leg deadlifts. And you're going to trying not to use any wrist straps here. Ideally starting off with a double overhand grip to try and work on that grip strength, and as soon as that grip starts to fail, I'll switch over to the alternate grip. But that's one way that I found to help build up that grip strength for the regular deadlift, is to maintain that double overhand grip as much as possible and try not to rely on wrist straps when it's possible to do so. In the stiff-legged deadlift, you want to think of keeping those legs as straight as possible, like loose knees. Think of shooting your hips back. One exercise is to stand like maybe a foot or two away from a wall and keeping your legs and back as straight as possible. Try and touch your butt to the wall, and that's kind of that motion you want to get with the stiff-leg deadlift. And here we just have some single arm dumbbell presses. It'd be nice to go heavy with the dumbbells, but equipment restrictions are there, so we only have a 50-pound dumbbell to work with here. So we're just playing around with some reps sets of 8 per side.
So that wraps it up for week 6. Nice deload week. Again, a shorter training session. Training sessions generally lasted between an hour, sometimes 45 minutes. So I thought that was kind of nice. Have that little mental refreshness. Hit the ground running for week 7. We'll stay tuned for next week, where I'm actually going to push more weights and bring that volume back, bring those intensities back up, and we'll see where it goes from there. This has been Solomon from WynnStrength, and remember, a better life through strength.